Welcome to the wild and wacky world of edged mindset. Just kidding, guys. Carter here with edged mindset. I just said that. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be diving into some topics, right? Some rambly thought type stuff. Now, the main catalyst for this is the Roosevelt XL. I have such a complicated thought brain relationship with these knives. And I actually just sold it. So it's being shipped out. I wanted to shoot some more content on this knife before it goes out. But I'm very conflicted with it. And I got a lot of different ideas on why I seem to sell these every time and why I can't seem to commit to owning them. And why, for example, my heart, right? Not my brain. My heart says this one's worth $1,000 and this one is not worth $1,000. Make that make sense. It really doesn't make any sense, but I want to try to dive into it and see if I can pick it apart a little bit. But let me caveat first. When I say thousand, I don't really mean that. I wouldn't actually pay $1,000 for this, but close enough to be comfortable, right? It's close enough to that value that I think it'll prove my point on what I'll do here. So this is the second Roosevelt that I've owned. First XL, I owned a regular size Roosevelt maybe a couple years ago. Won it in the lotto. Won the right to purchase it in the lotto, so to speak. I got it, wanted to check it out. I knew I could sell it and move it if I didn't like it. I got it. I appreciated it. There was a lot of things that I kind of dug about it. But ultimately, I ended up selling it. And the same thing happened with this one. However, I really thought I was going to hang on to this one this time because I had a chance to try out the XL. My friend Angelo sent it into the channel, sent in his XL into the channel. I really liked it. I didn't care for the straight diagonal milling so much, but then coincidentally, like the day after or the day after that, there was another lotto that I haven't been paying too much attention to Oz recently, but I was like, I want to see when the next lotto is. Oh, there's a lotto open. And this was available for lotto. And I kind of just put in for, it was regular, and then there was another XL. I put in for all three. And then I kind of immediately was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. That was dumb. I don't think I want it bad enough to put in for the lotto, but I thought, hey, these hold their value well enough that if I get it and don't like it, I can sell it, which, you know, is basically true, Side note, one of the interesting things is these XLs, when they first popped off, they were going for a lot of money. I think like $1,300, $1,400 on the secondary market, which is about in line percentage-wise with the regular Rosies that were being sold on the secondary market. But now these have dropped quite a bit. These are basically, you can find these pretty much at table for the most part, these XLs. They've kind of lost some of their excitement, and I think it's because it's so big. And I'll talk about that here in a second. Really, we're diving more into review things. Now, let's talk about it now. So there is an interesting thing that happens with this knife when you excel it up to this size. I'm all over the place, guys. I apologize. And it's kind of bugged me. So on the regular size, the aesthetics of this knife really work for me for the most part. It's a little smaller than what I like. And I've got a weird pricing hang up where I struggle paying a lot of money for small knives. For some reason, I think if I'm paying a lot of money, it's got to be big. It's got to be big with a lot of material, all that kind of stuff. So I struggle from that standpoint. But aesthetic-wise, the regular, it seems like it was designed to be that size. Like these flat scales here on the regular size look really good. But when you blow it up to this size, all of a sudden they seem a little flat and blocky and plain. Even with this milling on here, imagine it without this milling, right? It's one of those things where, same with the blade, it's such a simple, it's just a high grind, kind of a flat grind with a little swedge at the top. When it's small, it looks really good, but when you blow it up, all of a sudden, it just seems like a lot of real estate on that blade. That's kind of like what's going on there. Anyways, back to where I was talking. So I knew I put in for the lotto. I ended up, quote unquote, winning the right to purchase. And, I pulled through, I got it. I made some content with it, and here it is on the chopping block again. And I'm trying to figure out what it is about it. Because for some reason, here, I'll pull out an example here. For some reason with this knife, I draw a lot of parallels to Chinese-made knives. And I don't mean like the way they look, even though, I mean, obviously there's some similarities here. But for some reason with these kind of bearing, not flipper, but fidgety type knives, for some reason I think, well, I can just get this for like a third of the cost or less, actually like a quarter of the cost. And I draw a parallel to like a Kunu here, and I'm kind of like, why would I pay 3 times the cost for essentially the same knife here? But I don't seem to do that with like a Strider, even though in theory I should. Yeah, the action's completely different. You know, the style of knife is completely different, but they're both just locking. I was going to say frame lock. This one isn't a frame lock, but we can pretend this is a frame lock. It very well could be. They're both just folding knives with premium materials, you know, titanium and high quality steel and all this stuff. But for some reason in my brain, with something like the Roosevelt, I think, wow, for a quarter of the cost, I can just get one of these. But I don't think that with Strider. And I think it's probably, a lot of it is just the nostalgia with the Strider. And more importantly, and you know, I lament about this all the time. Even aside from the nostalgia with this and similar knives, Hinderers and things like that, there's a certain, like, I feel like there's more to the company, right? They stand for something. There's a certain vibe. The people that are into these knives have a certain humor. There's history there. Like, to me, with companies like Strider, CRK, Hinder, some of these legacy brands that have been around a long time, not so much Spyderco, but yeah, really not Spyderco, but maybe you could say maybe a tad, you know, maybe a tad. I feel like the product it's a byproduct of the movement, right? The companies stood for something. The companies represented something, whether it was anti-establishment like Strider, which was taking what was out there and just doing something completely different. Hinder, which represented fire and rescue very strongly, as well as kind of that overbuilt kind of usability, utilitarian type stuff. Like they kind of stood for something and they had a mission. They were changing things. They had a mission. I don't feel that with knives like this. And it's probably just me, but with the Roosevelt and similar knives, I feel like it was primarily a business opportunity. You know, somebody said, hey, I know how to run machines. I bet I could make a better product than what's out there, which is noble, right? Because that's what most products are. Most good products, Apple, all those things, are seeing what's currently out there, seeing needs that haven't been met, and then coming up with a good solution, which is fine from a product standpoint. But when I get into knives, especially as a hobbyist, I got plenty of knives that cut. This would last me a lifetime. I could give this to my kid. I don't need any more knives that are just good knives. I want the more. I want the experience of the vibe and the attitude and the jokes and the history and all that stuff. That's primarily what I'm buying as a knife enthusiast when I get knives, for the most part. To me, this doesn't really represent that. To me, this just represents a product, a very well thought out, high quality product, but it's just a product, which is fine. I just struggle getting super excited with things like this. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Comment down below if, you know, everyone's going to have a different experience. And, you know, I know right now the popular thing is to be very product focused, right? You want, you know, and the idea of saying, yeah, I don't buy Striders because of the knives, may sound insane. And, you know, that's only partially true, but there is some truth to that. Like, you know, I don't buy Striders because I just need the best cutting tool I can get. You know, if I wanted that, I just would have bought this one and called it good and not have a YouTube channel and not hang out on the forums and not meet other people, right? So I'm into it for the more. Now, I know there is a hang up, though, of people paying a lot of money for a knife that doesn't represent the optimal of machining capability. A lot of people get hung up on that, and for this represents kind of that thing, right? Like a really well-machined knife with all the details. Everything is, you know, done superbly to a level where people really appreciate the technical and machining feat in this knife. A lot of people resonate with that. I come from a generation where that wasn't necessarily the most important thing, right? It was kind of what the company stood for, what they were doing different. And I know this is going to be a hard comparison for the younger folks watching this because they weren't around when Striders popped off. And, now they may seem a little cheesy, outdated, things like that. But when they came out, they were revolutionary in terms of what they represented as a knife, right? Prior to Strider coming out, this wasn't meant to be a Strider versus Roosevelt video. I just wanted this as a prop, but now I'm going off on a tangent. When these came out, they represented a complete change of everything that was out there. And, maybe the best example I can think of is like this Ramette, except imagine this Ramette not made quite as well with worse action and just satin blade and like bright plastic handles. Like that was the primary knife you were seeing outside of customs in the knife world before Strider came along. Strider came along with these raw earth tones without billboarding and paint and lasering. I mean, these knives looked like you dug them out of the bottom of like an old ammo can. And that was wild when these came out. There was nothing else like that. And the whole concept of it being more of a multi-tool instead of just a cutting tool. And it was all very, very cool, new and fresh. I don't really see that with knives like this. Now, they have taken the whole quality machining thing, like I mentioned before, to another level. And they are kind of doing the, fidgety action first type approach. But it doesn't feel as powerful as what some of these legacy companies were doing back in the day. But maybe that's just my old heart talking. And that's going to be the younger generation. They'll be making a video like this talking about the Roosevelt. And then all the young kids are going to be like, it's so boring. Like, why do you need a knife that you can flick like that? Whatever it is that's currently in style. But so the point of this video, I think, was, I don't know, it started off as like, is the Roosevelt worth the money? And I don't even think I mentioned that at the beginning of the video. That's what this was supposed to be. And the answer was, I don't know. To me, it's not. But I can't quantifiably say that because, like I mentioned at the beginning, the second I pull this knife out, and then all of a sudden any sort of logic goes out the window. Because at the end of the day, when you get into the hobby side of anything, logic gets wonky, right? And it's funny because people still want to try to apply that logic. People still want me to objectively say, this isn't worth the money, this one is worth the money, neither of these are worth the money, or this is, and here's why. None of it makes sense. None of these things are really needed for 99.9% of the people out there. This knife is too much for 99% of the people out there. We do it because we like to connect with the people. We like to feel a part of something. The seeking and the getting and the trading is fun. It's fun to do that. It's fun to try new things. It's fun to learn about steels and cutting and brands and history and all that stuff. That's why we do it. So inherently, is such and such knife worth the money? Is a tricky thing to say. And if you can't pick up on my channel yet, I don't do videos for casual knife users. I do videos for deep knife lovers, people that, they've got the things that they like and it doesn't always make sense, right? Anyways, this is probably the most wonky video I've ever done. I have to actually reevaluate what I'm going to title this video because it didn't actually end up being what I thought it was. Maybe it's just wild knife thoughts sparked by the Roosevelt. I am kind of regretting selling this. I've also got a weird thing while I'm going off on tangents, personal. I've got a weird thing with my knife collection. I've got these opposing forces where sometimes I really want to have a quote unquote small, small for a knife enthusiast, well curated knife collection, right? Where I've got one or two pieces from the main knife companies that I enjoy, and those are the pieces that I have. And it's an expanse, right? I'd have some CRKs, I'd have Roosevelts, I'd have some others, a couple Striders, Hinderers, maybe some very cool, well thought out Chinese knives. But then on the other hand, I've got this overwhelming urge to focus collecting on a specific brand, learn everything about it, pick up those unique pieces, have a cool, wide collection of a very narrow knife brand. And throughout the last couple of years, I've bounced back and forth where I'll sell my collection and concentrate on one thing, and then I'll be like, why do I have 10 Striders? That's ridiculous. I need to just pick 2 and then get other stuff. But I guess that's kind of a lot of people's knife journeys, right? That's the only way you can keep this madness going, is by switching it up and changing what you're thinking about it. But all right, guys, I'll drop it here. If you want to comment on any of this rambling nonsense, there's a lot of different things I've covered here that you can comment on. Please do down below. I want to hear from you guys, and maybe it'll spark some cool, interesting knife discussion videos in the future. All right, guys, I'm out. Talk to you later.